Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was transported to the Last of Us dimension, Naruto x Ellie, Part 3. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, 10,000 Future Naruto, link is in the description. Also subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let's start the story. Naruto groggily awoke to the sound of gunshots and screaming in the distance. Wait, gunshots? Screaming? Naruto reevaluated to himself as he jumped out of his bed in response. It had only taken him a split second to assess situation and for the adrenaline to pump through his body, blasting away his fatigue. Naruto quickly estimated having slept only 2 to 3 hours, and as a result he was feeling heavily fatigued and assumed it was due to last night, an early morning's training regime. Naruto cursed at that. Now was definitely not the time to be feeling tired. He needed to be in tip-top shape if what he heard was anything to go by. Naruto quickly looked around and spotted Cassandra, who had also awoken from the gunshots and screams in the distance and was likely assessing the situation as well. He looked around further and noticed Melissa and Max weren't present in the room. However, Naruto couldn't waste any more time to dwelling on the issue and quickly assumed they were already up and helping the community in one form or another. It wasn't exactly hard for Naruto or Cassandra to understand what was going on. Gunshots and the screams of infected easily pointed them in one direction after all. It was clear that the infected had breached their community, likely from an opening, and if they were to survive someone had to plug the hole up. How? Naruto thought, as he hurriedly made hand signs for 2 shadow clones in preparation to defend the community. Naruto and community inspectors had previously made sure several times over that the infrastructure was strong enough to hold the infected out, and even set several checkpoints to ensure there wasn't any surprise assaults. With what was happening, it either meant that the infected managed enough force to bypass the blockades or someone made a mistake which led to catastrophic results. Naruto asked his current capability. He was sore, tired, and low on chakra reserves due to exhausting himself earlier that morning, and with little time for recovery. He was going to have to work with a handicap, something he really didn't want in this situation. And to top it off, he had stored his primary equipment in the armory, and simply couldn't divert time to collect it till the community was properly secured, or at the very least the central chamber. At the moment, Naruto needed to prioritize his chakra use, and ensure his shadow clones were extra careful in engaging in close combat till they could properly equip themselves with knives, guns, and ammo. Naruto cursed at this predicament. There was simply no time to prepare, and every second wasted would continue to endanger more lives in the community. No longer exhausting time and effort over the issue, Naruto and his clones rushed out of the room, closely followed by Cassandra, to help defend the community and save what people they could. He glanced back at her as he ran down the central chamber and inspected her quickly with her preparation for the coming fight. He noticed she had a 9mm handgun in hand, most likely from having slept with it close by, and was still in her nightgown, having not changed during their quick assessment. It was obvious there was no time to change and prepare, and was ill-equipped to properly fend off the infected. As such, it was going to be especially dangerous for her, and Naruto had to be extra careful to ensure she made it out this alive. Well, at least she was making herself useful, Naruto thought while focusing ahead. He wanted her to stay back and secure her safety, but that was a delusional thought. There was no way Cassandra would readily agree with what was happening around them, and there was no room for argument. Naruto had to prioritize his time first and make himself useful. Naruto reached the main entrance for the chambers and found the front metal wired gate busted down. He took a moment to analyze the state of the chambers, and so far it was chaos. Those who were sleeping out in the open were most likely suffering from the worst morning wake-up call of their life, and trying to fight off the infected either at close range or with a handgun they usually carried, while those posted on guard duty were busy buying time for the locals by taking on the bulk of the infected from the main entrance. The guards were better equipped to deal with the problem, having been on guard duty. However, they were severely outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and weren't likely to survive if any more time was wasted. Naruto needed to act to ensure the chambers were secure, then he can work his way outside to the source of the problem. He wanted to rush out to get to Mary, however that was an inefficient decision at the moment, and would likely result in the death of himself, Mary, and the whole community. For now, he would focus on the task at hand, and hope she was okay later. Naruto quickly tasked his clones to help secure the chambers, and kill any infected already inside while he and Cassandra worked to get the metal bulkhead down. This was the best plan at the moment, as he could see they were mainly entering from one location, being the broken down barbed fence, and closing the steel iron bulkhead would buy time for the survivors to regroup and resupply with more effective weaponry in the armory. What remained of the security force station there was fighting them as best as they could. However, they were struggling to get the bulkhead down. He needed to interfere. Naruto looked at what weapons he had The clones weren't equipped with any weapons, but that can be easily resolved, as they fought on inside the chambers. For the moment he only had a combat knife, which he kept on him at all times. It wasn't enough to fight them all off and plug the main hole they were entering, but he knew he had to start small first. He had to be quick and activate the emergency button. Naruto rushed to the entrance with Cassandra following close by, taking shots at any infected in their way and assisting any survivors she could see in combat with the infected. She was a good marksman from all her practice in the training room and past experiences with being infected. However, she couldn't run and shoot at the same time, so she took intervals to stop, aim, and shoot while Naruto ran in blatant kamikaze to the objective. No words were exchanged prior to engagement, but they knew what needed to be done and were mutually worried for each other. They couldn't focus on conversation now. They had an objective to complete, and time was against them. Naruto had reached the wired fence and noticed the security guards still fighting, two fighting in close combat while one other was taking shots at any incoming infected. He noticed several on the ground already having multiple bite marks all over their body and having been shot in the head with blood still pouring out. They were likely infected and quickly turned due to multiple bite marks and needed to be put down to ensure that they couldn't spread the infection further. In his split-second analysis, Naruto noticed two fallen guards in particular that had caught his attention. It was a male and female, the same ones that greeted him in the chambers on the first day. From what he had heard, they had gotten together in a month after he had joined, and often greeted him when he returned from his scavenge. Naruto cringed at the thought. They were gone just like his friends in the Shinobi Alliance, and more would follow if he didn't take control of the situation. Naruto needed to press the emergency button and close the metal bulkhead. Ignoring the security guards and their current predicament, Naruto prioritized his main objective and rushed past them with his combat knife in hand, aiming to press the emergency button. His presence, however, didn't go unnoticed by the infected, and they lunged at him hoping to take a bite. He dogged most, who were eventually taken down from the distance by Cassandra and a freed security guard who likely noticed what he was planning, allowing him to advance further. Naruto dodged more infected maneuvering and jumped through what openings they made, masterfully making his way to the emergency switch. Naruto tried to minimize his use on the combat knife for the moment, as attacking would take time, which would result in him being swarmed. Clickers and runners all surrounded him, trying to bite and claw at him, while Cassandra and what remained of the security tried to buy him movement by taking down those immediately in his way. Naruto approached the button for the bulkhead, however was too slow in pressing it, and an infected clicker took a bite on his arm, resulting in immense pain and blood loss. In those few moments Naruto was being swarmed, however not before prying himself free from the clicker and killing it with his combat knife, then managing to take a lunge at the emergency button, closing the steel bulkhead and officially cutting off any more infected making their way through the entrance. Naruto was still combat capable, however was severely injured and needed to heal himself soon, and would do so as soon as he dealt with the infected. Right now he was surrounded and would likely die if he were any normal human. However, he wasn't, and it had been long enough that he was able to recover enough chakra for a. Naruto took a split second to create in his hand and aimed forward onto a clicker, hoping to kill it and blast an entrance through the swarm of the dozen infected that surrounded him. On a normal day he would have stayed and dealt with the infected alone, but right now he was still tired, hungry, low on chakra, and injured. For now he needed to regroup with the security personnel and Cassandra and deal with the remaining infected as a group, while Naruto and his small group continued to deal with the remaining infected around the seal breach. The clones had been set on aiding civilians and security personnel scattered throughout the chamber, ensuring as many people survived the morning assault, while at the same time properly arming and rallying them to re-establish order. Fortunately, there were only a few runners that had made it in, with the bulk of the infected forces preoccupied at the breach, and so far there were only a few deaths confirmed from bites in the chamber. From what the clones could see, there were only 3 infected runners further inside, much less than Naruto originally had estimated, and it didn't take long to subdue and kill them. With the success of the original in blocking off the breach with the bulkhead steel door, it was only a matter of time till the civilians and security personnel in the chambers regrouped and launched a counter-offensive. Later, civilians and security personnel were now completely equipped with proper weaponry acquired from the armory. Naruto took this time to collect what items he could by equipping his large main storage scroll and a few smaller scrolls by his waist. Inside he had stored several guns and knives acquired from his scavenges, as well as medical equipment and some supplies. After all, the state of the sewers was in complete question, and, as much as Naruto wanted to spend time using Sage Mode to completely analyze the situation, there was simply not enough time to do so. There were others outside the central chambers sleeping in the many rooms scattered throughout the sewers, as well as security personnel who had been on guard duty. He simply couldn't spend precious minutes staying still and concentrating. 1 second passed could mean the additional death of another person, and he needed to act ASAP. Naruto took the moment to reprieve the guards and the civilians who had used to equip themselves, and noticed something he had overlooked in the frenzy. Where were Cassandra and Mary's parents? He thought to himself, confused. He hadn't seen them at all yet, and he was sure they were in the room by the time he went to sleep a few hours ago. Naruto walked around inspecting everyone. Still, he couldn't find any traces of either parent. Where are they? Naruto began to frantically look through the remaining crowd of people he had not inspected, and horridly concluded to himself, are they outside? The sudden realization frightened Naruto. If they were outside, they were likely dealing with the infected horde. He needed to leave now. He could guess where they were headed, and assumed it was to visit Mary after all. Either had any early morning security shifts. Naruto hoped they made it to the medical room, and barricaded themselves at any sign of trouble. He shuddered at the thought of what would happen, and what he would find if he didn't. Naruto looked around for Cassandra, and had noticed her frantically searching, and assumed she was catching on to the situation. Naruto approached the now heavily armed Cassandra with a sewed shotgun in hand while an assault rifle and pistol as her secondary. Cassandra noticed his approach, and with desperate eyes pleading for a solution, she looked at him. Naruto already knew what was happening, and what he needed to do on top of searching for other survivors and securing the primary entrance infected are using to get in. He knew he couldn't leave Cassandra with the other survivors, as she would likely run off on her own if she didn't partner with him on the search and rescue mission. It was her family out there after all. So with an uncertain heart, Naruto cleared his throat and spoke. Cassandra, I know you know your parents aren't here, and are likely outside. I think they were heading to the medical wing. I'm going to check it out. I assume you're already coming along, right? Naruto spoke seriously. After all, it was an extremely serious situation, and their success or failure would mean the survival or destruction of the community. The roughly reorganized community in the central chambers had Susan and Ish as the primary leaders, and made plans to defend and take back the community, while searching and securing survivors that were outside and had survived the initial onslaught. The likelihood many survived was low, especially since accommodation was mainly open, and even the usually happy and cheerful Susan was distraught, having found out her husband Kyle and the children were outside the safe zone. She had tried to rush off on her own in hopes to save her family. However, Ish had stopped her, stating she was more used to acting as a leader to plan their next moves. Naruto, original, on the other hand, was going to partner with Mary, while his other 2 clones would be working together to search for any survivors and either escort them back or secure them in an area for safety till they managed to cover the breach. Naruto, Cassandra, most of the locals, and what few remained of the security began to fortify the chambers to act as a counterpoint to the infected. This would be temporary until Naruto could locate the infected entry point and plug it up. Naruto, Cassandra, and his clones moved out, heading out the back way by climbing up the ladder from the nursery, and made their way to the medical wing. So far there was no sign of infected, nor any survivors. That was until they reached a fork in the road where one led towards the medical room, while the other towards the additional entrance to the community, and the key resting points such as the library, games room, and laundry place. Little was exchanged between Naruto, Cassandra, and his clones, but that was expected with how desperate the situation was. Cassandra's family and Naruto's way of life was in danger. Mary, Naruto thought worriedly. The clones took the path to the alternate entrance of the community. They had been equipped with an assault rifle, a sawed-off shotgun, and the standard secondary 9mm pistols as weapons, while also holding backpacks with a few med kits and supplies for on-site medical aid. They had enough chakra to do the mystic palm technique. However, the chakra was limited and needed to be conserved for hits and emergency techniques, hit points, and chakra points associated. This was especially important since if any of the clones dispelled the original could create a new clone, but the distance it would require to retravel was a point of concern, as time was important to the survival of the community. The more time they wasted, the more likely more infected would show up. The clones traveled down to the other focal point in the community, which was based just after the second entrance. As they progressed, they encountered runners, clickers, and even stalkers. However, by being properly equipped with a shotgun and an assault rifle, the clones were able to pick off the infected from the distance without having to resort to close combat. As they approached the second focal point of the community where garrison guards mainly stationed themselves, the more they saw the carnage that was left in the wake of the infected assault. So far they had found bodies of civilians and security personnel with bite marks around their body and a bullet to the head. Other times they saw infected who were once the people he loved and protected. He was too late for them. The more the clones progressed further into the community, the less confidence they had to the success of the mission with the carnage and fate of community civilians. Still they pressed on. Suddenly the clones heard the sound of gunshots ringing in the distance. It was coming from the study area, and the clones rushed into action. When they got there, they found the door open with an infected clicker outside. The clicker was easily felled with the combined attacks from the clones, and proceeded to rush inside the room. However, that was no longer necessary, as several runners and stalkers rushed out, attracted to the noise of gunshots. The clones didn't have enough time to register what was going on. Rather, they took notice of the several runners and stalkers inside, presumed to have busted the door open with brute force. The clones engaged in combat, firing from a distance at first. However, due to the reload time associated with the shotgun, 2 runners were able to bull charge towards the clone reloading, engaging it in close combat. The clone with the assault rifle couldn't provide support due to focusing on a more problematic enemy being a clicker. It didn't take long till more infected to show up, attracted to the fighting, and rushed the 2 clones flanking them from the front and the back. By now the clones were engaged in close combat, one using a kunai, and the other using a combat knife. Fortunately for them, Naruto had been polishing his taijutsu, capitalizing on his size, agility, and stamina for combat, rather than his old brawl-style fighting style, and, as a result, the clones were able to maneuver around each attack or lunge the infected runners and clickers continually attempted. In response, they shoved their weapon through the head, eliciting its instant death, or beheading, or cut-throating them. When the walkway was cleared out, the duo made their way inside the study area, rushing in each step, but remaining alert, aware that there might be more infected showing up. Once they made it past the doorway, the clones looked around. Clone POV. I looked around the study we had entered cautiously. It was just one of the 3 other studies we had set up around in the community, simply because there wasn't a room large enough to accommodate all the books accumulated over time, especially when the elderly saw it as a way to preserve the old world. As such, we separated the books in terms of classes, such as logistical knowledge and survival, in one room, and another set up for studies and pastimes. I and the other clone walked through the open door. I noticed the handle was busted, likely from the force exerted by the infected. Still, we walked in, cautious in every step we took. Inside, we were greeted by 2 stalkers hiding out, likely waiting for us to enter and ambush us in order to sink their teeth into our bodies. They were unaware how useless the infection was towards us and the original. Regardless, they were simple creatures driven by the mad desire to infect. Predictable, I thought silently, as I put them down with careful maneuvering and a bullet to the head. I looked forward, ignoring the recent death of the stalkers, and noticed something disturbing written on the floor with black crayon. "They didn't suffer" was written in big, capital, and clear words, posing as a prelude to a horrid confirmation as to what was to come. I looked up from the floor, and then around. I already knew there were no survivors, with the words, "an infection" being a clear indication. I looked up from the floor, and noticed a body slumped by the corner of the lower level of the study next to an out-of-place white sheet covering stretched out, covering something. Even from a distance I could tell what was likely under those sheets, but to Cammy it wasn't what I was thinking. Regardless of those thoughts, I approached the corner. I looked at the adult body slumped by the corner, and, as usual, I noticed a bullet wound to the head, a gun in one hand, and the other holding a note. But that wasn't what I was paying close attention to. Rather, I recognized the individual slumped against the wall. It was Kyle, one of the key leaders of our group. I had already seen many people of the community victims to the infection, but seeing Kyle like this just made the situation feel that much more morbid. Slowly I bent down, and acquired the bloody note in hand, and began reading it in detail. "We're trapped. I think everyone else is dead. Some of the little ones are with me. I got infected pounding at the door. I don't know how long we'll hold out, especially with that power-based infection lurking around. If Ish, Naruto, and the others are alive, maybe they can reach us in time. They have to reach us. The lock is breaking. I don't think I have much of a choice left. If it comes down to it, I'll make it quick." The note ended with a large bloody smear. It was obvious what he meant, and that made an unsettling feeling in his stomach. I looked towards my fellow clone that slowly moved aside the white sheets from the bodies of the children. As much as I wanted him to stop and avert my attention elsewhere other than the horrid sight, I knew it was our duty to find out their identities and inform the parents/guardians of their loss. As much as I didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, I was in the best position to do so. As expected from the note, the death of the children was quick, with a bullet to the head. No doubt Kyle putting down the children to prevent them turning into runners, then doing the deed to himself. All to prevent a fate far worse than death, the fate of being infected. It was a horrifyingly gruesome sight, to see the children I loved and played with the dead in front of me. Their eyes were closed, as if in an eternal sleep, never to wake up. It was a merciful death, saving them from horrid fates, and facing the reality of the dark world. Still, the feeling stung. I couldn't keep this up. I was losing everything again. I eventually covered the children's bodies with a blanket. I had noticed on closer inspection that one particular child was Jessica. She was also sleeping in an endless sleep, never to awaken. It was painful. I failed my precious people again. The children I laughed and played with were gone, innocence taken. I didn't blame Kyle. No, he did what was right, and I would have done the very same thing. Yet it hurt, and I didn't know what to do. Still, we needed to push on. We had to save as many as we could. We left the room, and I took a brief moment to look back at those lost due to the infection, and the children I had hoped to start anew with. Had anyone been watching, they would have thought it was quite the sad, yet accurate reflection of my life. Here I am again, moving forward again, away from a happy time lost through circumstances beyond my control and power. I was sad. I looked away, and walked on, focusing back on my duty to find any survivors. We had to survive. The locals, and what few remained of the security, spent their time fortifying the chambers to act as a counterpoint to the infected outbreak, and began making plans to retake the sewers. If that was not possible, they would have to look at a new area they could escape to, but so far nothing safe came up other than military settlements, and even so that was an extremely dangerous gamble since they were not registered in the system, and was an extremely dangerous journey. Additionally, if they settled anywhere on the surface, there would simply be too much reliance on Naruto to provide and protect them, and starting renewable supplies once more was an extremely difficult task with infected and hunters lurking about. There were many rooms outside the central chambers where survivors of the initial onslaught could survive, and some areas may not even have been penetrated by the infected. However, they needed to act fast. The doors were old and rusted. Most could be easily broken into, and without the proper equipment to defend themselves, and, as such, the survivors outside the chambers won't last long. Suddenly there was a loud smash with the crumbling of bricks close by. Naruto POV. I was worried about Cassandra's parents and the community, but most of my worry was focused on Mary, and if she was okay, I had to get to her before anything could happen. I needed to protect her. I promised myself I would, and I won't fail again. I quickly moved down the sewers, cutting down and shooting any infected in the way while closely being tailed by Cassandra, who provided long-range support via her assault rifle. We were making so much noise, and more infection poured into our position from behind or from the front, further hampering our progress. The medical room was far, and with the signs of infection so deep, some even being previous community patrons, the situation was dire, and it was getting to me. I only hoped that Cassandra's parents had barricaded the hospital doors in time. The anxiety of the situation kept pushing me forward. I was tired, my muscles fatigued, and my friend and family were in danger and dying. This all worked to hamper my concentration, and I was making many mistakes in combat. Had I not lacked speed and agility by even a little, I would have been chomped on. Fortunately, Cassandra was a good shot and provided the necessary support to avoid any close situations. We continued towards the medical room, and the usual 13-minute journey ended up taking over 45 with more and more infected showing up. As we progressed further, things weren't looking good. We eventually reached the medical room, and so far there were only signs of infection with no survivors as of yet. Still, I hung on to hope of finding Mary alive, and well, she was in the medical room. The most easily defendable room in the entire sewers, being strategically apt in barricading against infected or otherwise. I prepared myself and opened the door, wishing that there was some resistance holding me back. Yet I walked through and witnessed the most horrific sight that would be forever etched into my memories. Inside there was Mary and her parents Melissa and Max. However, that was not what had shocked me. There were infected inside the room already, with Mary and her parents covered in blood and bites. But most disturbing was Mary, and the infected were gathered around the parents and were continually biting them. I was stunned at the situation as I looked onwards towards Mary. It only took me a split second to realize what was happening, but I couldn't react. I was lost in my own world. I had failed them. I was too late. And Mary, oh Cammy Mary, she was gone, infected. They noticed my presence and looked at me with a snarl, as any infected I encountered did. They charged me, hoping to get another meal, yet I could do nothing. I felt numb and barely registered them as they charged. I was simply too far gone to react. Even with all my training and my experiences in the 4th Shinobi War till now, I still wasn't prepared enough for this encounter. I simply didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel. I felt lost, so much so I barely registered my surroundings through my blurred vision. I had failed. I just wanted this pain to stop. Fortunately for me, Cassandra maintained her focus and understood the situation. She was able to react in time while I remained in a daze. It was obvious she was hurt. It was her family that was now infected. The family she lived, fought, and bled for, and I understood that pain. Yet she managed to retain enough sense for her to shove me back outside out of harm's way. I owed her my life at that moment. I didn't know how long the entire process took, as I couldn't register the time, as I remained lost in my own world. Yet regardless of how vivid the situation was, I was able to register the gunshots and the pain screams from Cassandra. I momentarily woke from my gaze and prepared myself to aid Cassandra. However, before I could proceed back into the medical facility, the next thing I saw was Cassandra rushing out the door and barricading it with her M4. The entire ordeal was vivid in my eyes, and I barely registered Cassandra shouting my name and shaking me back into reality. I looked up at her with flooded eyes. It was blurry, yet I could still see her heterochromic eyes glowing through my blur and staring back at me in worry and pain. I noticed she was hurt and bleeding by her arm. She noticed my stare and hid her arm behind her back in an attempt to hide the problem. Shakily asked her, hoping I was wrong, where were you biting? I was worried. There was nothing I could do if she was, and I would lose yet another precious person on top of Mary, Melissa, and Max. It would mean I was too late, unfocused, and weak, causing the death of another precious person. I didn't know if I could bear it again. Cassandra didn't reply for a few tense seconds with the only sound of the infected banging behind the door. She avoided my gaze for a few tense seconds till she managed enough courage and looked down at me with pained eyes and a sad smile plastered on her face. Slowly she moved her blood-soaked arm forward, showing me the extent of her wound. I looked at it over and over, hoping that it was just a horrible joke she made to get at me, but I knew there was no way it could be. The situation was simply too serious for a joke. For a long time I couldn't say anything, trying in vain to register what was happening so suddenly, how everything had turned upside down within the span of a few hours. It was only yesterday when everything looked good, and everyone was happy, but now I could only look at the wound with disbelieving eyes, fully understanding how cruel this world was. Cassandra was bitten. I looked at Cassandra's arm, unbelieving at what I was seeing. She was bitten, and it was all over for her. Before I could continue to mull over the situation, Cassandra spoke up. Naruto, I know this looks bad, but we need to focus right now. People are counting on us. She spoke sternly, trying her best to hide the hopelessness in her voice. And why not? It was over for her, just like Mary and the family. I spoke up after a few tense seconds, staring into Cassandra's heterochromic eyes. What about Mary and your family? I spoke up, stumbling in my words, trying to recover what emotional stability I could. Another few tense seconds passed before Cassandra spoke up. Her short bangs cover her eyes, trying their best to hide the flurry of emotions behind them. They're still inside. I couldn't put them down. There were too many too fast. I think we should leave them till we finish securing the community. We need to focus on the present. She spoke solemnly, as tears slowly poured down. It was clear the whole situation was getting to her, and there was nothing left we could do. Still, I hoped for the best, and prepared the mystical palm technique, and applied it to her arm. I looked over and over for 10 minutes, unable to find a way to fight off the infection. I was losing everything again, and it was happening too fast. I didn't know if I could take it. Fortunately for us, we heard a loud bang in the distance, followed by a vibration along the floor, breaking us out of our reverie. I analyzed the direction the vibrations and sounds were coming from, and realized it was coming from the direction of the main chambers. Feeling stressed and uneasy about the whole situation, I quickly wiped away what remained of my tear-stained face, and firmed my resolve to help. We had a job to do, and we had to move. Clone POV. The other clone, and I continued to search for the breach, as well as any survivors from the initial onslaught. So far we weren't having any luck, and by the time we reached any potential holdout zones, we arrived too late. The survivors had been either killed by themselves or had been infected. There were cases where we found community personnel mauled to death with torsos and limbs torn apart, most part missing, along with large holes and dents in the walls close by. There were even times we found potential safe zones missing the door, as if something had rammed through with brute force. And every time there were signs of large-scale struggles against something. Whatever that something was, it was strong. A new type of infection? I thought to myself, concerned at the prospect of an unknown being the cause of the outbreak. Breaking out of my assumption, I looked around the room we had currently entered towards the end of our search, and identified what I assumed to be 3 bodies of security personnel scattered around. I at least really hoped it was only 3 bodies, but as I counted the amount of limbs scattered, there was an uneven number of arms and legs to torsos, signifying there were more bodies than I had initially estimated. It was simply too hard to tell. There wasn't a single complete body inside the room. All were dismembered, shredded, and scattered across the room. Infected generally didn't behave in this manner. Limbs usually stayed on the dead till the host was infected. I looked around at the stomach-churning room. The room was literally bathed in body parts and blood. There were significant signs of struggle. The desks and bookcases were knocked down and overturned, and the walls had dents and holes, as if something was struggling to push through. Not only was the level of struggle problematic, the entrance that we came through was missing. Something had bulldozed straight through the front, as well as through the large opening opposite at the back wall, an area connected to an additional sewer independent of the community, and it was clear that this was the area the infected horde had entered. I further analyzed the bodies that were lying about, and concluded from what remained of the uniform that they were a response team sent to investigate and quarantine the area, yet their attempts proved fruitless against the horde. With the way the breach was created, it meant there was a new infected running about with enough brute strength to create the breach. And if that was the case, there could be multiple entries where infected were pouring in. It wasn't looking good for the community. Still, we had to move and blockade the breach. There was another area we had to investigate. A checkpoint of sorts where another branch of the community resided. It was near the secondary entrance to the community near the pipe by the ocean where Ish had entered and founded the community. It was the last checkpoint we had to check, so we moved back out to conclude our search. We moved back out to the sewer passageway near the laundry area, and close by the study where we found Kyle and the children. We had locked the gate to prevent the infected from attacking us from behind, and so far it was keeping them out. Deciding it was best to block the passageway from the breach, we gathered what crates and barrels we could, and pulled it up on the passage. Of course, the infected had noticed our presence during the move, and began pouring in from the breach, but we were sufficiently equipped to deal with them from afar while continuing our mission to block the passage. It took a while, but in the end the main breach was blocked off, and fewer infected would be entering into what remained of the community. It is prevalent now that the cause of the outbreak be contained, and the new infected be put down as soon as possible. After we had checked the checkpoint, finding no bodies or survivors, my fellow clone and I concluded our mission was over, and we dispelled to let the original know of our findings. Naruto original POV. I received the memories from my clones, all the deaths and losses of the people I know. It was clear they hadn't found any survivors. What concerned me was the conclusion my clones came to of a new infected having broken down the wall of a safe room and leading the horde of infected into the community. This was a concern I had to deal with, as Cassandra, and I rushed back to the main chambers, worried at what disaster we would find. Eventually Cassandra and I managed to make our way to the bulkhead with minimal time due to the infected having been dealt with prior, only to find it open followed by screams and gunshot inside. Worried at what was happening, we made our way inside. Third POV. Naruto and Cassandra rushed through the entrance to the main chambers, finding the bulkhead open and the area in complete chaos. Everywhere they looked there were bodies, blood, and bullet casings scattered all over. The sounds of screams, groans, and bullets were prevalent and loud, working in tandem with the environment to perpetuate a chaotic effect. It was clear people were dying in the droves, and with the amount of infected already inside, and more pouring in, it wasn't likely much could be saved. Still, they had to try. Naruto, having experienced loss and death throughout the day, was already used to the sight, and it didn't take long for him to analyze the situation and act. As the situation barely stunned him, he leapt into action and created 2 clones, equipping them with assault rifles from his waist scroll. This was done as their primary engagement would be long-range support, as Naruto, the original, would be too preoccupied in close-range combat to continually make new clones. As such, the clone's survival was vital. Cassandra, as usual, would provide long-range support, and stood side by side with the clones, and began shooting any infected she could see. Naruto, the original, engaged in close combat, firing sporadically with his handgun while maneuvering in close quarters to deal with the bulk of the infected. Cassandra and the clones followed close by, and provided support by taking shots at infected, interfering with Naruto's slaughter, as well as others about to engage from a distance, all while doing their best to stay well away from the entanglement of bodies. Their continual resistance, however, didn't go unnoticed, as more and more infected of all kinds changed towards them. Fortunately though, Naruto with his close combat focus took the bulk of their attention, and each passing moment more and more infected fell to his combat knife expertise or by a bullet from his gun. Eventually their numbers dwindled to more manageable levels, freeing up their focus and mobility. However, this freedom didn't last. A loud roar with the trembling of the ground gave way to a gigantic infected charging Naruto. This infection, however, was vastly different to its counterparts. Each step it took caused a small but noticeable tremor that would slightly disorientate any human facing off against it. Its head was similar to that of a clicker. However, if one were to look closer, the bipedal plates growing off its head were significantly larger, and its jaw being monstrously large with blood oozing off its sharp teeth. Additionally, its body was huge, and unlike the bloaters, the body was not fat, rather it appeared larger and more muscly with protective layers of plates acting as armored scales. Its roar was loud and terrifying to the unprepared, and clearly this infected was the one responsible for the breach, causing the deaths of countless in the community. Think of Berserker in Gears of War. Naruto and Cassandra hadn't seen this kind of infection before. It was new and different from the standard infected they encountered, and it was as if the infected themselves were evolving, becoming more deadly and efficient. It was a frightening thought. The infected already ruled the vastness of the world, and for them to grow stronger would spell disaster for all of humanity. Naruto saw the Berserker infected, which he newly named, charge at him. Its large arms are pumping at its side like an Olympic runner in the sprint, Its roar hindered what concentration anyone had while frightening the remaining survivors. As it sped towards Naruto at an amazing speed of 45 kilometers an hour, he reacted in time to roll to the side, dodging the behemoth as it sprinted past him and smashed the opposing wall, running right through it. At least now Naruto knew for certain it was the cause of the breach and the wanton trail of destruction the clones had discovered. Still, it did nothing to quell the present situation. The community was gone, everyone was dead or dying, and what few survivors remained was that few. There was nothing left to salvage here. Naruto prepared his counter-attack alongside his clones. From what he could see, bullets had little to no effect on its armor-protected body. The only valid weak point Naruto could see was its head, but again bullets had no effect on it. This meant Naruto's best bet was to use explosive-based attacks, and while engaging it in close-quarters combat, then when the opportunity arises, finish it off with chakra-based attacks in order to bring it down. This was a lot harder than it sounded, with it continually rushing towards him at breakneck speeds while at the same time being exceptionally bigger and armored with miniature plates. Regardless, Naruto knew it was best he dealt with it on his own, as his clones and Cassandra were better spent dealing with the other infected pouring inside. So in what time he could task before its recovery, Naruto commanded his clones and Cassandra to focus on clearing infected and saving what people they could while the berserker infected was dealt with by himself. It was better this way, as no time could be wasted dealing with just one adversary when more were incoming, and the infected couldn't be left alone to cause any more damage. Far too many were dead because of this monster, and he had to do what he could to ensure it was taken down, and its wanton path of destruction halted. Naruto prepared himself, and put away his gun while equipping a couple of explosive kunai from his waist storage scroll, and readying paper bombs and explosive tags for use. For the moment, his strategy consisted of weakening the infected armor, and exposing the much weaker skin underneath, in which he would use chakra techniques to land the finishing blow. Naruto jumped up, avoiding a charge, allowing the berserker to bypass him. In response, Naruto flipped in the air and launched 3 explosive kunai at the infected. It wedged into its armor, and without a moment too soon all 3 exploded with a display of fiery orange and dust. However, the fight was far from over. Instead, Naruto was met with a thunderous roar of pain, and was greeted to the sight of only slightly damaged armor having peeling away by a little. Naruto decided to test the armor again, and launched explosive bombs at the infected. This again only peeled away a bit of its armor. However, this time, instead of roaring in agony, it charged Naruto in a fit of rage at a much faster speed. Naruto again dodged to the side, and was greeted to the sight of the berserker infected running into a wall and burying itself onto it. Again, Naruto launched explosive kunai at the target with similar results. This process went on repeatedly, and time was running out. Deciding he had enough, Naruto decided to test the effectiveness of chakra bullets to put it down. The results were far more favorable, and the armor peeled away, exposing the more susceptible skin tissue. It was now weakened enough for a Rasengan to deal a finishing blow. After dodging its sporadic charge one last time, Naruto prepared the Rasengan, instinctually creating it without the need of shadow clones. Then Naruto charged the berserker with Rasengan in front, and shouted Rasengan. Although the name-calling of the technique was unnecessary, it was his signature move, and was an instinctual means to an end. Naruto charged the Rasengan into the chest of the beast, as it turned around to face his opponent. The Rasengan was strong, and extremely successful, as it grinded its way through the berserker infected. Then not a moment too soon the Rasengan exploded, with the resultant force blasting apart the chest of the monster, while sending it flying forward and further into the wall. Without a doubt, the berserker infected was now dead. Naruto took a couple of seconds of rest while inspecting the environment. He looked around, and noticed the level of destruction and death throughout his chambers. The walls had multiple holes where infected were pouring in due to his fight, while Cassandra, the clones, and what remained of the survivors were barely holding the infected out. The floor was littered with the corpses of civilians and infected, blood pouring out their open wounds. More and more infected began pouring into the chamber at an exponential rate, no doubt attracted to the sounds, and it was clear they couldn't hold the chambers. He needed to get Cassandra and the survivors out. There was no time. The sewers were lost. There was simply nothing left to save. "We need to go," Naruto shouted out in desperation. Infects were pouring in, and the 2 clones he was going to leave behind could only buy a little time before they were overwhelmed and out of chakra. He needed to move. Naruto, Cassandra, and the 3 survivors ran out the bulkhead door and down the corridor, using their weapons to bring down any infected in the immediate way. Those that they didn't bring down began chasing them. Then all too soon the clones dispelled, and the whole horde was after them. They needed to escape the sewers. The chase went on for a good 15 minutes. The survivors were unable to make the chase, and were tackled down by infected, bitten repeatedly, then added to the number of the horde. Now only Naruto and Cassandra remained. Both were running through passages and doorways, closing and barricading them to buy what time they could. They dodged infected from the front lunging at them, and either shot them down or dodged them, adding to the number of pursuers. Naruto and Cassandra eventually made it to the main entrance, the entrance that began Naruto's stay in the community. They passed Annie and security guards on the ground, dead, mauled with headshots by the looks of it, and most likely caused by the berserker infected. They didn't deserve such a fate. They approached the barrier, the doorway to the entrance and exit of the community. They were nearly free and away from the whole mess. Naruto was tired, exhausted from all the fighting, running, and lack of sleep. He was already running on adrenaline, as it is. He needed to rest, and he needed it soon. Naruto and Cassandra rushed past the double door, locking and barricading it with what they could find. It simply wasn't enough to blockade it with a long metal object. There were simply too many bodies pressed against the door, and adding to the fact that infected, particularly clickers, had an added strength, proved dangerous to test that theory. Therefore, they couldn't trust the barricade to hold. They needed to move, then regroup. Cassandra's loud cough brought Naruto back to reality. It was clear the infection had spread to her brain, and she was changing. There was nothing he could do. He tried the mystical palm technique before, but nothing changed. He simply couldn't combat the infection, not yet. Not until he knew more about how it operated. Regardless of all the work and training he did, he was still unprepared. Everything he worked for and achieved amounted to nothing right now. A wasted effort on his behalf. Cassandra continued to cough. Her eyes were becoming dilated and darker, and her skin incredibly pale. She was changing, and he needed to do something. Naruto's eyes watered. All the stress and loss was getting to him, destroying what mental barriers he had placed for his protection and well-being. Regardless, Naruto approached Cassandra in hope that this time his medical ninjutsu will make a difference. This time, NAR Naruto stops. It won't change anything. Cassandra let out with a raspy voice, barely containing her need to cough. You know it won't make a difference. We won't know until we try. Naruto spoke out, hoping beyond hope that things would be different this time. Naruto performed the necessary hand seals and activated the mystic palm technique. He applied it on her arm and analyzed the infection. He could tell it was already too late. He could see that it had spread to her blood and had already begun to infect her brain cells. Soon she would experience severe memory loss, and eventually she would turn into a runner. Still, Naruto frantically searched for anything, any clue in her biology that may lead to her surviving the infection, or at the very least buy her more time. It took over 20 minutes, and nothing was showing up. The only difference was the exponential spread of the infection with its growth in her system, along with the symptoms of severe coughs and pupil dilation. Eventually Cassandra had enough. Naruto, that's enough. I'm dying. I want to spend what time I can with you, then I'll join the others. Naruto was already crying. Tears slowly pour out his eyes, but keeping his wails non-existent to ensure Cassandra's final moments would go unhindered and remembered. I'm sorry, Cass. If only I was stronger, smarter, then none of this would have happened. I could have saved you. I could have saved everyone. Naruto spoke out raspy, trying his best to hold back his tears and wails from another lost friend. It's not your fault, Naruto. You saved us. If it weren't for you, we would have died sooner. I would have died sooner. I just want you to know. Cassandra reached out, cupping Naruto's soft cheeks in her palms, and kissed him on the lips. I love you. I wish things could have been possible between us. This did nothing to calm down Naruto's internal turmoil. Rather, it intensified it. Different scenarios running through his head of what could have happened if things had stayed on one path. What happiness he could have had, and the love he would have given and received with Cassandra and Mary. Now those scenarios were no longer a possibility. All because of the infection. All because the world was screwed. Cassandra spoke up again, her voice softer and with less life. Naruto, can you sing me a poem? Like you promised? I want my last memories of you to be sweet. When I enter the comatose state, you know what to do. I don't want to end up as an infected person. I want to pass on remembering you, the happy times we shared. Naruto wiped away his tears. He knew it was too late. The infection had spread to critical levels, and there was nothing he could do to counter it. But he was firm in his stance to finish her last wish. So Naruto began his poem, and sang, I was searching for something, but I didn't know where to look. I searched for so long, and all my time it took. What was I looking for? Or what was looking for me? My eyes I kept open, but I just couldn't see. It was gnawing at my heart, and ripping through my brain. I didn't know what was wrong. I thought I was going insane. I was tired of looking for something that I thought was impossible to find. It was tearing me apart. I prayed to God to give me a sign. I waited and waited, but the sign never came. Finally, one day it happened. My heart completely changed. I found what I was looking for, but I wasn't looking for this. Am I sure this is what I was looking for? Or was it something that I missed? When I looked into the eyes of this something I thought was fake, I saw an angel looking back, and my heart it did take. This something that I've been looking for was a true gift from God above. The missing piece I found was you, and your love. Naruto looked down at Cassandra, She was in a dreaming state, only moments away from becoming a runner. Knowing what needed to be done, Naruto wiped away the tears pouring out, and shakily lifted his handgun. A minute passed by. The world was quiet. Even the infected from the other side of the barricade had stopped banging the door, likely having given up on getting through. Naruto prepared himself. His face was stained with tears once again. Then when everything seemed quiet, Naruto fired. 1 year, and several months later, Naruto was currently traversing through one of the alleyways of Boston's quarantine zone, as he followed Tess and Joel from a distance. He was curious of his new surroundings, having been smuggled in during the night, and having to wait for Joel and Tess to attain his fake identification credentials. It was simply suicide to go directly to the military for the proper credentials, especially since examinations were involved, and questions of his origins would be raised. So instead the group settled with attaining fake credentials for Naruto to travel the streets. How? Simple. Tess pulled some favors and various black market dealings to get the credentials. Of course it cost a lot of ration cards, and he would have to work it off, but he was confident he could do so. As of the moment he, Tess, and Joel had a delivery to make, and with him being new to the business he had to follow them till he was properly familiarized with the city. He looked forward, eyes carefully darting around to find anything suspicious while maintaining a calm and relaxed demeanor to ward off any attention. He tensed when he noticed a guard patrolling on the rooftop, but relaxed, as no attention was diverted onto him. He may be a ninja, but he wasn't experienced in black market dealings, especially in a new world with a different form of military presence. Currently he was an illegal immigrant on his first official day in conducting high-risk smuggling operations in and out of Boston. A smuggler who was illegally processed by the wrong people, and if caught would bring about a whole new set of problems. 1. Appearing as a young child he could get out of trouble and undergo integration procedures, then made into a proper civilian of the quarantine zones. However, that was after passing through rigorous medical procedures and inspections that would likely give away his unique biology, which was another problem itself. If he managed to bypass the medical procedures and inspections resulting in successful integration after some time, it would likely result in him being sent to a military training center or camp for children. After all, he was an orphan. He would be under constant surveillance and would lack the freedom to do much of anything. And that's if they don't find out about his secret smuggling job and abilities. 2. If he was caught, processed, and discovered to have medical discrepancies compared to the average human, he may be let into the community with the likelihood of forced military service entailing constant surveillance, or live the rest of his life as a lab rat. Then again, that was only if they could capture him first. After all, anyone would resist such a fate. This in turn would reveal his abilities, starting up a manhunt to find out his secrets from various parties including the military, the Fireflies, and prospecting parties wanting to take advantage of the find. This would definitely happen if they found out his natural immune system was resistant to all forms of viruses, parasites, and fungus. Fortunately, he hadn't told anyone that yet, even his new coworkers Tess and Joel, though he knew they suspected something. Sure, it would be a major boon for humanity, but the stark differences in his DNA meant that any form of artificial replication to attain a solution for the populace would result in failure. Naruto was not about to lose his life over something that wasn't likely to work, but, as usual, there was a way for his immunity to pass on, and that was through having children. Naruto shuddered at the thought of what he would be subjected to for his reproductive DNA, and what his children would go through in the name of science. 3. Naruto could be immediately killed. As far as things go, he was committing a major crime by smuggling in weapons and various provisions in and out of the quarantine zone. As such, if he was caught in the act, he would be deemed a criminal, his bounty posted all over the city, hunted, and eventually forced to reveal more of his abilities just to survive, intensifying the hunt yet again. He sighed at all the prospects of trying to integrate into the community. Sure, the community wasn't perfect, but it would be a whole new dynamic to explore. After all, this military society functioned differently than that of the elemental nations, and being a proper civilian would allow him certain benefits, rather than acting in the shadows. Looking forward, he sped up to maintain a good distance with Tess and Joel. Naruto looked around the alleyways he just entered, noticing the minute details of the rundown buildings, trash scattered all over the place, and the overfilled bin. The buildings were dirty with cracks running down the walls, while others had bullet holes from firefights. As usual, most windows were broken, and have been boarded up, and nailed down with wooden planks or left alone. Some windows still had air conditioners pertaining to the lost technological prowess of the past. Of course, they weren't working, either being in disrepair or the lack of electricity available for use. Naruto noticed 2 civilians, 1 man, and 1 woman talking by the overfilled bin, and piles of trash stacked on each other. He decided to listen in on their conversation, discreetly of course. "Wait, are you serious?" the man said, surprised. "I got served the damn papers this morning. So I've been selected for outside work duty." The female replied calmly before her tone changed to one of frustration and exhaustion with a strong hint of sarcasm. It's such crap. Soldiers are supposed to handle the outside. I'll make sure to tell them that. Naruto had heard from Tess and Joel that the majority of military patrolling the streets were actual children from camp brought up to fight for the military, evident by the way they were organized, how they moved, and how young they appeared. These were the ones meant to crack down on any smugglers and Firefly personnel, and were loyal only to the military. With all the recent rebellious activity happening, most capable military personnel were being diverted to the safe zones. Naruto found it sad seeing those that patrolled the outskirts were now composed mainly of civilians rushed into service from either being commissioned due to the military number gap or with the need to survive and attain ration cards, the current form of currency inside the safe zones. Naruto passed through the gate which Tess opened and traversed through the narrow alleyway full of garbage and broken furniture. He noticed a rusted sign opposite to the gate that hung crookedly on the wall. Most noticeable about it was the red spray-painted words "Free," a sign of the extent of military oppression. He looked left and noticed another spray-paint sign in white and in capitals "Seek the Fire." He trudged down the alleyway, passing more garbage piled on an overstuffed bin and more boarded-up windows as he walked onto the street. As he entered, Naruto immediately took note of the military guards posted in front, one on the roof, and two more on the opposite side of the street. They were in their standard assault rifles and decked out in bluish combat wear with the vest armor and helmet. Suddenly a military Humvee passed on the road with a microphone in front. Attention. Citizens are required to carry a current ID at all times. Compliance with all city personnel is mandatory. He looked again at the landscape, taking note of the slightly crooked transmission pole and the wire and cement barricades set up. As expected, none of the buildings looked like they had undergone any form of maintenance since the outbreak. Look at that. Ration line hasn't opened yet. Must be running low again. Tess said it was natural to the situation while leaning on a cement barricade waiting for Naruto to catch up. He noticed the people lining up in front of the building, frustrated at the lack of movement. "Hey, how much longer?" a female civilian said with clear annoyance in her voice. "Lady, when the rations arrive, we'll open the door. Alright?" was the simple reply from the guard. "This is fucking bullshit. I bet those uniforms over there don't get half the rations." A civilian man spoke up, agitated at the length of time being spent on waiting. He traveled further down the streets. More soldiers were present, and he noticed a makeshift barricade set up with people being detained behind. It had several guards posted with a military Humvee close by. The guards this time, however, were not wearing helmets. Instead, they wore hats. He focused on the figures behind the barricade and noticed a number of civilians kneeling down while some were being forced to with arms behind their heads. He took notice of two more people decked out in white quarantine wear who were leading the operation. Military police, he assumed, and clearly they were in the middle of an investigation of what he wasn't sure. Trying not to look suspicious, Naruto passed them by slowly while listening to their conversations. "Let go," one of the civilian men said. "You leave me alone," another replied, agitated. Down on the ground, one of the men decked out in white quarantine uniform expressed with authority in his voice, easily dominating the entire conversation. "I hear it's another half ration week." He heard a female guard posted by the barricade say to another soldier, clearly ignoring what was transpiring behind her or simply not caring. Okay, Jesus." A frightened man spoke this time, afraid of what was happening. "I said get down." The quarantine argued again in a higher voice, however instead was met with frustration with the remaining man standing. "Are you fucking kidding me? That's 3 weeks in a row now." The still standing civilian man spoke, frustrated at the common occurrence. *pow caught. "I didn't do anything wrong. Hands on your fucking head. Do it." "Well, what are you gonna do? Keep your voice down. What's wrong with you?" a civilian said angrily towards the quarantine officer, also losing patience. By now Naruto was disgusted at what was happening, yet could do nothing. "Alright, scan them. Seems like more people are getting infected." Tess finally spoke up, as she too was listening in on the conversation from the distance while walking slowly towards the checkpoint. "That just means more people sneaking out." Joel finally spoke up, clearly experienced in the investigation taking place. "Whatever. I don't care anymore. Let him take me. He's clean. Then suddenly, "Got a live one." "No, I'm not infected." The female spoke up, desperate, out of confusion or unaware of her infection. At this, Naruto stopped walking and looked back on the scene. He knew what was going to happen, as Tess filled him in on what Boston was like, and knew he couldn't intervene or risk exposure. No wonder the Fireflies were increasing in power. "Ah shit, hold her down." "It's wrong. The scan's wrong," the female replied desperately again, crying this time. "Do it." The man spoke quickly, signifying his experience with the scenario. Please, the girl was now begging with tears in her eyes. Naruto watched on and did nothing. He could do nothing. In the past he would have rushed in and saved her like a knight to a princess, but this was the present in a different world with different rules. Having gone through the Fourth Shinobi War and the events in the sewer community, he could no longer rush in without thinking. He knew there would be severe consequences if he did so, especially when he discovered the effect natural chakra had to the infected. So instead he watched from a distance, and for a brief moment their eyes connected. Then, bang asterisk. Alright, she's down. Fuck this, a male civilian said, as he ran trying to escape the scene. A uniformed guard spoke out suddenly while aiming down the crosshairs of his gun. Bang asterisk. Holy shit, shut up. Consider yourself lucky. That's what happens when you hide out in a condemned building. Call the cleanup crew. Yes sir, we'll stay put. They're on their way. Shouldn't be long, one of the guards in uniform said. The investigation was over. Naruto looked away. Sure, it was his first time in Boston, and the whole experience was new to him, but he knew he could do nothing. For the moment he had to watch out for himself, so he looked away and walked on towards the checkpoint. Tess and Joel have already moved on. As he progressed further towards the first checkpoint, Naruto couldn't help but think about how things had changed and the life he left behind in the sewers. All the friends and family he made and lost. It was a depressing thought, melancholic in nature, and almost brought tears to his eyes yet again. Almost. He had cried enough. He had moved on through the continuity of time. He won't forget all he had accomplished and lost, as it was what defined him. Flashback. Naruto POV. It had been weeks since the events pertaining to the end of the community and my short life in the sewers. Everyone, as far as I know, was dead, and everything I had loved and fought for was ended by the infection or by my hand. After sending Cassandra to her eternal sleep, I had passed out exhausted from all the strenuous activity, stress, and lack of sleep piling on from the day's events. It truly was a horrid sleep. I dreamt of all my friends I made from the elemental nation standing side by side with the family and friends I made in this new world. Complete happiness was plastered on their faces. Granny Tsunade, Ero-sanin, and Sakura were there, but more importantly so were Mary and Cassandra. Mary was dressed up in a sunflower dress and looked healthy as she stood upright. Cassandra was standing next to her with her usual red hoodie and tight blue jeans. Both were holding hands, and both were calling out to me louder than everyone else, enticing me to join them, to follow them. But as I walked forward, I could never approach them. Every step did nothing to conquer the distance between us. I was only a few meters away, yet it was an unconquerable distance. Over and over again I tried to approach them, shouting out at them that I wanted to join them, yet nothing changed. I couldn't get closer to them, couldn't be with them. I was now desperate, and lunged at them just hoping that I could touch them, but I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed, and all I could do was look on. Eventually everyone began disappearing one by one. First those from the elemental nations, then those from the community. By the time everyone had disappeared with smiles on their faces, Cassandra and Mary remained. They both spoke. Naruto, Mary said soothingly. We're heading this way. You should go back now. Cassandra spoke up cheerfully. It's time for us to get going. What are you talking about? I replied desperately. The three of us will go together. There was a moment of silence. You have a world to explore, don't you? You can't rely on us forever. Later, Naruto. If there is a heaven, we'll see you there someday, okay? Mary said cheerfully yet again. While wait, I rasped out. I couldn't lose them. I had already lost enough. I couldn't stand losing anyone else. I reached out with my arm, hoping they would pull me through. Please don't leave me alone. They didn't turn around. Instead, they started walking away in the distance, slowly disappearing. I awoke with a jolt, and a cold sweat pouring down my brow. It was a horrible dream, and something I won't forget anytime soon. I looked around trying to regain my bearings. It was dark, yet there was minuscule amounts of moonlight pouring through the gutters and other openings in the walls. I could hear low sounds of clicks and groans behind the barricaded door behind me. Slowly I remembered what had transpired that day, what had happened to the community, and what had happened to Cassandra and Mary. I realized I had never actually left the nightmare that ensued earlier that day. I was still in the sewers, and had just collapsed from exhaustion after dealing the final blow to Cassandra through the heart. Cassandra. Shakily I looked right to see Cassandra sleeping peacefully in a permanent bliss. It was a beautiful yet sad sight. Memories of the times we spent together came pouring back, bringing tears to my eyes. I stayed there slumped by the side of the barricade, taking in the whole situation, contemplating all I had lost, and how weak I truly was. I didn't know how long I stayed there slumped beside Cassandra, but it was long. Hours had passed by, and all I did was look at Cassandra, and the memories of my life. My life as a shinobi, my life as a survivor. Eventually the hunger got the best of me, having not eaten all day, and expending large amounts of energy to survive. This proved beneficial, as it brought me out of depression, and had me focus on something else, for the time being. Knowing the community was dead, I planned to retrieve the bodies of those precious to me. It was far too dangerous to attempt a complete retrieval with my current emotional turmoil, and a horde of infected behind the door, but I at least needed closure with Mary and Cassandra. Having practiced thoroughly with it was now possible to seal bodies into my scrolls without any repercussions. Firming myself on what I had to do, I sealed Cassandra into my large scroll strapped to my back, then prepared myself to face the horde. My family at least deserved a burial. Unblocking the barricade and opening the door as I charged, intending to dish out as much damage I could to the monstrosities and to get what closure I could. One day later, a day had passed, and I had successfully retrieved Mary, Melissa, and Max, and found a large hill by the side of the river where I could bury them. The confrontation with Mary and the parents was literally one of the worst fights of my life. It wasn't hard, just emotionally difficult. Her mutated red eyes staring at me with great malice and anger, opposite to the kind, upbeat, and caring Mary the first once knew. Blood trickled down her brow, signifying what she had been doing, eating the corpses that lay on the ground. Her own mother and father. The infected had not been satisfied when the parents likely turned to suicide and began eating them. It was a horrid sight. They didn't deserve to die like this. Mary didn't deserve to lose her memory of everything she fought for and everything she loved just to be turned into a mindless infected. The memory of this encounter would forever be etched into my mind and dreams. I did what I could to not destroy her body and keep her head intact. It took a lot of effort, but eventually I was met with success, yet it was still a horrid sight to look at. Her snarling expression plastered on her face, even in death. I focused back on the present, and looked down at the grave holes of my clones, and I dug by the river cliff. I had scavenged coffins from the local chapel that were unused and untouched. It was clear nobody found use for them in the present world, but I had a purpose for them. I wanted to give Mary, Cassandra, Melissa, and Max a proper burial by their culture. They deserved that much for bringing happiness to my life, no matter how brief it was. In addition, I was able to scavenge flowers, a tombstone, and proper clothing as my clones, and I dressed the family up for a proper burial. For the parents this proved difficult, as they were missing large chunks of flesh, but after rigorous emotional difficulty I was able to dress them up and cover their wounds. Then I prepared my farewell speech and spoke it to the heavens and to the family. 1,000 times we needed you. 1,000 times we cried. If love alone could have saved you, you never would have died. A heart of gold stopped beating. 2 twinkling eyes closed to rest. God broke our hearts to prove he only took the best. Never a day goes by that you're not in my heart and my soul. I looked one last time before the cover would close permanently, barring my sight from them forever. All members were dressed appropriately. All their eyes were closed with a serene expression plastered on their faces. Then after an hour of reflection, memories passing by, as I looked on, I gave the order to my clones to close the coffins and descend the bodies to the earth. First the parents went down, then Mary, then Cassandra. I didn't know how long I stayed there looking at their graves as the clones dispersed, but I stayed as long as I could. It was dangerous to stay too long, as infected or other scavengers may notice my presence, but I didn't care. By some divine miracle they didn't. Flashback end. I focused back forward as I approached the checkpoint only meters away from the tragic investigation, yet everyone remained calm and natural as they casually talked to one another, evidence of death being a common occurrence. I noticed military vehicles and trucks entering through the gate by the highway. Metal fences and gates had been set up, and the irony of it all was there was a lone American flag atop a pole, and a closed newsstand only meters away. Out of all the areas I passed, this was clearly the cleanest. I looked up at the view, and was taken back by the beauty. The clouds were overshadowing the city, yet the sunlight was penetrating them, causing the overcast to glow silver. Most skyscrapers appeared unaffected by the events transpiring below, testament to man's technological achievements, yet one lone tower had collapsed, and was leaning off its twin for support. Truly the apocalyptic scene was beautiful. As I walked and analyzed the scenery, I overheard another conversation, this time between a male and female guard. They fucking lynched him, the female spoke up. The entire squad? Yeah, way I heard it. They lined them up in the street and cut him up. Retribution and shit. We ever lose control of this place to the stragglers, that's what will happen to us, the female said again. That will never go down here. Any stragglers even look at me the wrong way, I put his ass down. The male guard spoke up, confident in his abilities. I'm sure that's what they thought at every other QZ before the riots broke out. It's those goddamn fireflies. They keep stirring the population up. We need to put an end to them. That's how you solve this shit. It appears the fireflies have the military on constant edge with their guerrilla tactics and careful coordination, working to hinder what order the military provided. Then again, the military had a bit of a tyrannical streak due to the permanent martial law, the negligence of basic human rights, and the struggle to produce food. The few minutes of walking down the street were proof enough, and, as expected, this tended to put people on edge, and everyone needed someone to blame. Others just lashed out violently. The failed quarantine zones were proof of that. I walked further, noticing the checkpoint meters away. Military Humvee and trucks were lined up waiting to be processed and passed through the several metal gates that had been set up. Many warning signs were posted up, and again there were many guards that were either patrolling or being stationary on the walkway, guard towers, or on the ground with assault rifles in hand. I looked up and took note of the yellow banner that stood out as I approached the entrance to the next district. Checkpoint South 5, it read, indicating their location. Additionally, a guard had been posted there to check credentials with an assault rifle in hand, prepared for any suspicious activity. I got us newspapers. They shouldn't give us any static up there, Tess said. Just play it cool. I approached the checkpoint, taking out my fake identification credentials with an innocent look plastered on my face. Although this did nothing to diffuse the sternness in the guard's expression. As expected, they were lax around me, being a child in their eyes, except for the expected questions of why I was not in the military academy, why I was traveling with Tess and Joel, and why I was carrying a suspiciously large scroll almost the size of myself on my back. To anybody this was grounds for suspicion, but seeing as I was a kid, Tess answered for me. After checking the scrolls only to find random squiggly lines, they didn't push their suspicion any further, chalking it up to me being a weird kid. Had they known the truth of what I was carrying, they would have either detained me immediately or opened fire. I was fortunate that very few people knew of my abilities, and even then it was a select few people I had a level of trust and had begun to work with. Additionally, if they blabbered my abilities, no one would believe them and chalk them up to being crazy. Had the guards known what I could do and managed to bypass the squiggly lines on the scroll, they would have noticed that the scrolls were actually packed to the brim with ammunition, weapons, and medical equipment that would supply a small-scale army. Our current mission was to deliver the equipment to the Fireflies after we found a safe place to conduct the delivery. After all, I didn't want people finding out my abilities. Guess I'm the delivery boy these days. I sighed thinking about Konoha and the missions there. What I was doing was similar to what the Black Ops ANBU and Elite Ninjas did. I was just doing it with a greater level of success and lower risk by taking advantage of my abilities in a chakra-less world. I guess that's why I took the business with Tess and Joel. It reminded me of home. I'm hoping eventually that I can bring a piece of my home by distributing chakra out like the Sage of Six Paths did, and what I did with Kurama during the Fourth Shinobi War. But that's a long way from being practical again. Even then, is it really the right thing to do? Endless wars followed the creation of chakra. What's to say the same thing won't happen here? Especially when lone individuals can challenge and change the world to the extent Madara Uchiha did, and not in a good way. He had seen enough assholes in his journey here. The electronic gates creaked open, bringing me back to the present. I was free to pass through to the other district alongside Tess and Joel, a preferable path to take rather than traveling through underground passageways and buildings that were likely crawling with infected. I took back my ID credentials and thanked the officer, then began walking down the road, passing more guards alert for any signs of suspicion or activity. I had to focus. We had a trade to do. Several months have passed since the consequential end of the community and passing of Mary and Cassandra. Naruto had taken the loss hard, and during this time ate and slept minimally as he traversed the vast wastelands that once housed the world's superpower, now but an apocalyptic wasteland teeming with infected and hostile survivors. With the fall of democratic civilization, much of the surviving population that remained outside the quarantine safe zones held by the military were struggling to survive with the need for basic necessities, especially during winter, and as such, the more deplorable acts such as cannibalism were becoming commonplace. It has been over 12 years since the outbreak of the fungus, and what useful food and materials have been scavenged away by other survivors, while areas that still held abundance were either under control by another group of survivors, usually hostile or teeming with infected. Naruto, however, wasn't concerned with such petty problems. Rather, it was hard for him to show much concern anymore. He was essentially a walking husk. Every time he saw an infected, he would either pass by them undetected or brutally destroy them, disregarding the need for efficiency. Every survivor he saw, he would generally ignore them and keep to himself. He had learned the hard way not to tie himself down lest he be hurt again. During this period, Naruto traveled the vast apocalyptic landscape, sometimes entering cities, other times not. He didn't have to worry about supplies. He had plenty left from his scroll, and easily could scavenge more. Besides, he was eating and training less, minimizing his overall consumption. Naruto did still train, however kept it minimal, as he traveled across America, progressing further inland. Naruto during this time showed little improvement to his attack reservoir, but one important discovery he made in his training was his practice of. He discovered over time it had an adverse effect on the infected, and every time he used senjutsu, the natural energy would attract infected bees to honey. When he made the connection, he was horrified. Did he kill the community? Was he the cause of its destruction? were the prevalent questions that enveloped his mind at the time. He spent most of his travels wondering what would have happened had he not practiced overtime. He was sure the berserker infected wouldn't have made an appearance, after all he had yet to encounter another of its kind, and a horde of infected wouldn't have taken the chance to flood into the community. This discovery deepened his depression, making him more inert to his surroundings. He even tried committing suicide once by his own hand, but couldn't bring himself to finish the job with a knife. Was he too courageous to end his life by his own hand, or was he too much of a coward to face his family and friends in the afterlife, and against all the failures he caused? This line of thinking went on and on in Naruto as time passed, and it would be a long time yet till he recovered. As time progressed, Naruto slowly became more in tune with his surroundings. It started with the small things like spending more time training and eating more food, yet slowly but surely Naruto was going to give life another shot. Sure, he was a changed man, having learned from his past, but it was a start. Several months later, Naruto came across a small town crawling with infected on one side, while only a few could be seen frolicking around on the other. It was obvious to him that that area of the town was occupied, evident by the various fortifications and traps laid around to keep different people out. Normally Naruto would have avoided such areas, but his food supplies were starting to run low due to months of neglect, and thought it would be a good idea to take a look. Lately Naruto had been thinking it was time to settle down again, and find some form of sanctuary from his ever-changing environment, or at least someone to talk to after months of loneliness, preferably someone that won't just shoot him on sight. He decided to enter the town, and focus on the area lacking infected, and, as expected, there were traps everywhere. Bombs on wires, mines, and even some improvised traps. Simply by walking up walls and hopping across rooftops allowed Naruto to avoid the traps at ground level, which a majority of them were. It was clear the traps were meant to keep the infected out, but also to target any scavengers and unwelcome guests such as himself. Not caring about the warning on the walls, Naruto looked around the town, bypassing the traps and several infected, leaving them unaware of his presence. As he got closer to the center, Naruto began to draw on nature energy to sense out any people. He may have regretted using senjutsu in the community, but it was his only practical way he had to sense out people and infect long range, and he was sure using it in the area would have a minimal effect on the town. Reaching out, he identified 3 people staying via a house in the district he was searching. For the moment he decided to avoid them, and instead search the area for any supplies and equipment he could use. Several hours later, Naruto didn't find any supplies in the houses, and only found a few useful items he could use such as knives, clothes, and scissors. Overall, he had just wasted his time. It was clear anything useful had already been picked clean. He did find one thing interesting though, a note, and from the looks of it, it was recent. Reminder, collect more pills. See if I can scrounge up some extra ammo. I only have 3 weeks until the next drop off with Tess. Naruto didn't know who Tess was, or who wrote the note, but he had a guess that it was the other non-infected occupants in the town. It was clear that there was a trade agreement arranged, and if there was trading being done, it meant the people could be reasoned with, people that weren't hostile on sight. Looking through another abandoned kitchen, he scoured the drawers for anything interesting. So far all he could find were dirty cookbooks when all of a sudden, boom, asterisk bang asterisk bang star. Explosions and bullets could be heard, followed by shouting and a lot of curses. It sounded close, very close, and if Naruto could hazard a guess, it was just outside on the street. Curiosity getting the best of him, he decided to investigate, taking his time to crouch and sneak towards the front window. As he approached, the sounds were getting louder and louder, easily telling him he was going the right direction. Naruto peered outside the window, and outside he could see 3 people, 2 men and a woman. One of the men was overly fat, the other thinner, wearing a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt. He couldn't make out the more distinct details of the individuals due to his proximity with them and him, but he supposed he could still easily identify them from the distance. He watched on as they fought off several runners, while several more starting to pour through a broken part of the fence, closely followed by several clickers. Naruto cursed not having noticed them so close to his position. "Bill," the female shouted. "I know, this way," the overly fat man identified. As Bill sounded off, he watched as all 3 individuals began running the opposite direction down the street before running into the back of a house and closing the door, likely barricading the entrance. Naruto, thinking he'd seen enough, got up from his hiding spot when suddenly 2 runners ran into the room from the open entrance via the kitchen and charged directly at him. Reacting instantly, he pulled out his revolver from his holster and fired 2 shots, felling one runner while the other managed to jump onto him in an attempt to take a bite out of him, holding its head away by the throat. As the Caucasian runner attempted to chomp on his face over and over, Naruto quickly pulled out a knife with his right hand and stabbed him through the head. As soon as it was dead, Naruto motioned to move it off of him and rushed to get up. the gunshots having likely attracted the rest of the infected to his position. Clickers and several runners were making themselves known at his position, banging along the house entrance, and likely making their way through the back. Even the more prominent bloater was moving towards him. Deciding it was best not to stick around, he ran up the stairs to the second story to make his way to the rooftop. No sense taking them all on, and wasting precious time, resources while putting himself in danger after all. 1 hour later, Naruto easily escaped the infected, making his way around the town. He eventually found the group of survivors who appeared to be moving further into the town. By listening in from the distance, he identified the 3 individuals as Frank, Bill, and Tess. Frank was the male with the outlandish Hawaiian shirt, Bill the slightly overweight male holding a hunting rifle, and Tess the only female of the group. Naruto quickly assumed it was Tess from the Pill's note he read, and from what he could make out they appeared to be in the middle of a trade, and were coming across problems ranging from infection to the transportation of the equipment. Naruto, curious about the deal, decided to follow them discreetly behind the barricades and along the rooftops. He continued to listen in, and was able to pick up several tidbits of information such as their trade agreement of ammo and pills in return for food and other essentials, as well as the female Tess being from the Boston QZ, where she and her partner Joel had based themselves. As they made their way to what he heard was the main safe house by the church, he continued to follow them. That was until more infected showed up, dozens upon dozens of runners climbing over a crashed trailer acting as a barricade, followed by several clickers close behind. As they jumped over the bus, the mines having been set up along the street immediately felled several of the infected, but more kept coming. "Damn it, Frank, I told you to check the barricade," the one identified, as Bill shouted out, as he took out his hunting rifle and fired at the incoming infected. "Don't pin this on me," Frank shouted back, as he lit a Molotov and threw it at a duo of infected running in his direction. "Now's not the time." "Bill, how far is the safe house?" the female shouted out, who was already shooting at the infected with a revolver in hand. As they continued to shoot, more and more infected jumped over the trailer, getting closer and closer, their Molotov and bullets doing little to feel the infection. It was clear to Naruto that they needed help. He debated with himself if he should do so, as it would mean exposing himself, and he didn't know if he could trust them or if they would come to trust him enough not to attack. The infected were upon them. Frank, having pulled out a 9mm handgun, continued to fire alongside Bill, while Tess was caught up in hand-to-hand combat with a runner. Clickers were starting to make their way towards them. He needed to choose whether to help them out now. Taking a gamble, Naruto pulled out the assault rifle, his weapon of choice when dealing with several runners and clickers at once. Noticing the female identified as Tess on the ground trying desperately to keep a runner from taking a bite out of her, and the other 2 trying desperately to keep the clickers back, Naruto aimed quickly and carefully down the scope and fired. Immediately the runner was shot dead, and he quickly moved to focus on several of the closer infected, including the clickers. "What the hell?" the one identified, as Bill shouted out, taking a quick look back to see a blonde kid shooting at the infected. "Ah, fuck," he swore before aiming back down his hunting rifle to take out an infected before reloading. The one identified as Frank just took a quick glance back before continuing to shoot. Tess looked back at him, grateful for his help, before picking up her revolver, reloading, and continuing to shoot down any infection down the path. Asterisk click, click, click asterisk, damn it, Naruto swore. He was out of ammo, having used it up during several of his fights out in the country. It didn't help that the ammo was hard to come by, most having been scavenged long ago. Substituting, he pushed the assault rifle back on his back via the holster, and pulled out the revolver, continuing to fire down the road. It wasn't long till there were no longer any signs of infection climbing over the barricades. As soon as the infected had been taken care of, Bill shouted out quickly to the safe house. The group quickly ran towards a metal gate, and up the stairs towards the safe house, clearly identified more as a refurbished church from the back. The group ran down the cellar, closely followed by Naruto, and once at the bottom, Frank, Tess, and Bill turned their attention towards Naruto with their guns up, Frank flanking Naruto from behind as he closed the cellar door. Naruto, having already expected this, also had the revolver up, aiming it towards them. "Who the fuck are you, kid?" the paranoid one identified, as Bill shouted out, trying to intimidate him towards an answer. "Answer me or I swear to fucking God I'll blow your head off." "Easy, Bill, it's just a kid," the one identified, as Frank spoke, trying to ease the tension in the air. "Bullshit, it's just some fucking kid. He has guns, and sure as hell knows how to use them. He could be with others for all we know, surrounding us as we speak," Frank shouted back, not breaking his concentration on Naruto in preparation to shoot if there are any sudden moves. Naruto also doing the same. Tess, the female of the group, spoke up. "If he really was out to get us, then why help us out?" Tess spoke up, confused on what stance to take. "We were being attacked by a horde of infected. With nowhere to go, he would have been bit if he didn't act." Bill spoke out, tone still high and threatening. I'm right here, idiot. You can ask me. Naruto spoke, trying to get them to talk to him instead of between them. From what he could tell, Bill was a paranoid one, though he supposed with the state of the world it was a good thing. Okay kid, what is it you want? What are you doing here? Tess spoke out again, slightly calm while lowering her gun slightly to show her a more rational nature. Naruto, seeing no harm in telling her, replied, I was just looking around for anything interesting, and some food, until I ran into you guys. When the infection started coming around, I thought it would be a good idea to help. You lot owe me. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have gotten out with that many infected charging at you, especially when you yourself was on the ground. Tess lowered her gun slightly, followed by Frank. Bill, however, remained firm with his stance. Thanks for that, by the way. Tess replied, slightly more subdued. No problem. Bill. Frank spoke out, trying to get him to lower the gun. Fine. Now if that is all, get lost, kid. He spoke, as he lowered his gun slightly, though the expression on his face clearly told Naruto that he didn't trust him. Actually, that isn't all, Naruto quickly responded to. I was listening in on your conversations. I heard about the Boston QZ, and I know you're traders or smugglers or whatever. Naruto spoke, as he pulled out a small note from his pocket with his unequipped hand, while at the same time lowering his gun slightly to emphasize a more friendly negotiation. He handed the small note to Tess. There are 2 things you can help me with, and if needed I can trade some of my equipment. Tess looked at Naruto closely, scrutinizing every feature. She noticed that he was fairly young, around 8 or 9 years old if she would hazard a guess. He looked Caucasian with a slight tan, and had 3 distinct whiskers-like marks on his cheeks, and the bluest eyes she had ever seen. She looked closely, noticing his clothing and equipment. He didn't really have much on him to warrant a great level of trade. Still, she would wait till he was finished. First, I want to be smuggled into the city and attain the proper credentials to blend in. Illegally, of course. I have some problems getting in legally, Naruto continued. Second, I want in on your business. Excuse me? Was Tess' quick reply. I want in with your business, Naruto replied simply again. And what makes you adequate for our business? She spoke, slightly arrogant. After all, their work wasn't something a little kid could do, or rather was supposed to do. How was he even so mature for his age, for that matter? Tess thought, as an afterthought. After all, kids weren't known to survive the American wilderness without help. Tess decided to take a quick look around. As far as she could tell, it was only them around. For that matter, you don't exactly have much on you. What could you possibly trade that would warrant all that trouble getting a little kid like yourself into the quarantine zone, let alone attain the adequate credentials? And if you did have the equipment, what's stopping us from shooting you and taking it for ourselves? If you've been outside, you would know that's common practice. She spoke informatively, as she put a hand on her hip, more out of experience than skill. After all, she had been at the business for a while now, and she didn't like to work at a loss. Tess continued, on top of that, you want to work with us? What use can you be? I admit that if you are alone, then you definitely have good survival skills. Hell, you even know how to negotiate. But that isn't going to mean much with your age and all. No one looks up to kids these days. Naruto thought about it. In a way, she was right. He had to show something that would warrant their interest. Naruto thought it over for a second. He had to take a chance, show them a bit of what he could do, keep them interested, and off his tail. And if done correctly, he would still have a lot to hide. Naruto reached for the scroll on his back. Sure, he didn't have much food on him, but he did have a surplus of medical equipment and some weapons that would warrant interest in trade, and at the same time show them what he was capable of, frighten them a little, and get them to agree that there is business to be made. Bill stiffened, readying himself to shoot at any given notice. I'll show you. I have something, and can do something that would warrant great interest in this deal. Okay, show us, kids. Frank spoke, still suspicious, but curious as to what he had for trade. Naruto put his pistol down and into its holster by his side. He continued to look at Bill, who still had his hunting rifle up, and pointed at him. Bill, lower your gun. There are 3 of us here, and only one of him. Let's see what he has to show us first. Frank spoke calmly, trying to defuse his partner. Bill lowered his gun slightly, but was suspiciously watching Naruto closely for any sudden moves. Taking that as a sign, Naruto reached out for his large scroll on his back where more of his supply surplus was located. Slowly pulling out, he unrolled it on the floor. Everyone looked at him more confused and suspicious. He supposed it didn't make any sense after all why he would take out a big scroll, or why he even had one for that matter. Naruto looked at them, an expression aimed at Tess to see if he could continue. As she nodded, Naruto placed his palm on one section of the scroll and channeled chakra inside. Suddenly, poof, several stashes of medical equipment, supplies, and weapons suddenly appeared in front of them. There were around 28 first aid boxes full of medical supplies and additional medical needs, including pill cartons and more stuff he scavenged from an infested hospital a long while back, as well as several guns he took off corpses or found lying around. Suddenly Bill, Tess, and Frank had pulled out their guns again, and aimed it down on him again. Surprised, bewildered, and slightly frightened. "What the hell?" Bill shouted out, completely focused on Naruto. "How the hell did you do that?" Frank followed, slightly more subdued in his words than Bill. "I suggest you start explaining to kids," Tess spoke out, firm yet compromising in her approach. "I have certain abilities. I can store almost any inanimate object into this scroll, including food, medical supplies, weapons, even corpses if need be." Naruto focused his attention on Tess. "As you can see, I have stuff that you would deem tradable, and this is only a small portion of what I have available inside. I think there should be enough to trouble you to get me inside Boston, and for me to attain some credential to fit in. Now, as for my second request, as you can see I have a unique ability. I have stored a lot of equipment and materials inside my main scroll, and can pull them out when need be. This cannot obviously be accessed by anyone other than me. Now, take into account that I'm a kid, a young impressionable kid, people would be less suspicious of me, particularly soldiers. I therefore can act as a delivery boy for items you need for transport, and what better way than to do it than in the open?" Naruto continued. "Additionally, I have been surviving outside alone for a while now, and as you mentioned I therefore have high combat and survival prowess. And if that doesn't convince you, think of this. I am a 9-year-old kid surviving in a world of cannibals, infected, and hunters. In order to survive I have to be unique, right? So I ask you this, what other abilities could I have that would allow a 9-year-old like myself to survive outside? Now I'm sure with all of this, I can contribute greatly to your business. Besides, now you know why I don't want to get myself involved with the military. If they saw my uniqueness, I shudder at what they would do." Naruto finished. Frank, Tess, and Bill still had their guns up and aimed at him, but he could see their resolve wavering. He offered a lot in this deal, and they stand to gain more than what they would lose. They may not trust him at first, and he didn't need them to. He just needed that first step. The rest will work itself out. "Okay kid, you have a deal, but if you try anything there is no turning back." Tess spoke suddenly, as she lowered her gun. "Are you serious, Tess? It's a fucking kid. It's probably a trick or something." Bill spoke skeptical about Naruto. "What? You have an explanation as to where all these supplies came from?" "I'm with Tess on this. The advantages it would bring would make things simpler for us, let alone solve our current transportation problem." Bill took a second to think it over. "Fine," he said forcefully, as he lowered his gun from Naruto. "Tess is the one taking care of you. You try something that's in her hands," Bill said before walking off towards the other end of the cellar. Everyone watched as he walked off slightly disgruntled. Frank spoke up. "Don't mind him, he's just a bit paranoid." "What's your name, kid?" "Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki." "I'm Tess." "I'm Frank. That guy over there is Bill." Tess spoke up now onto business. "We're having trouble transporting our goods into Boston. There's too much making it difficult to carry let alone move, and that's a whole new problem when the infected start showing up. If you can help us out with transportation then you have yourself a deal." "What kind of weapons will I be carrying?" Naruto inquired, curious if there was anything new to the normal weapon stack he had available. "Just the standards, a couple of rifles and handguns, the stuff most people use, but most importantly a couple of bags of ammo and pills. I have someone else outside waiting so we need to meet up with him soon before making our way into the city. So I'm basically the delivery boy." "Yeah, it should be easy with what you can do, but more importantly it would be a whole new set of problems once we smuggle you in. We can do business in the city once we get inside. You do this right then you have a deal." Naruto, Tess, and Frank began walking up to Bill, who seemed to be gathering all the bags stacked with ammo and various weapons he had found and collected. Naruto looked at the amount, whistled. He could see several bags and a moderate supply of rifles and handguns. "Where the hell did you get all these?" Naruto spoke out of curiosity at the stash. Coming across these in such quantities was such a rarity these days. "None of your business, kids." Bill spoke out, not bothering to dignify him with a look, as he continued to gather the weapons and supplies into one spot. "TCH, Naruto sounded out annoyed. Then again he supposed the level of suspicion from him was warranted. A minute later all the necessary supplies were gathered onto one spot. "Okay kid, do your magic." Naruto took out his main scroll again and placed it on the ground unrolled. He began channeling chakra onto one of the empty seals, and poof, all the supplies were gone. Frank whistled. "I'll be damned." "Okay kid, we'll be making our way to the southern entrance where my associate Joe will be waiting for us. Keep the supplies safe, and no funny business." Tess spoke, as she and the rest began making their way towards the basement entrance again for a trip to the other side. "You know, I'm surprised you haven't asked how I can do this." Naruto spoke out after a while. "Kid, if you're into the smuggling business like us, it's best not to question the details." Tess finished. 1 hour later, Naruto, Tess, Frank, and Bill hadn't been infected since their run in near the safe house. It was testament to the other traps and barricades holding up all around town overall, making a long and boring journey for Naruto. As they came upon the southern tip of the town, Frank and Bill left, heading back to the safe house having completed their part of the bargain, and with how late it was getting. As Naruto and Tess approached the water tower entrance, he noticed a man waiting cautiously by the barbed fence overgrown with vegetation. All they had to do was get over the fence, easily achieved by walking along a plank set up across 2 buildings. Naruto could jump above it, but he supposed walking along the plank was best, with it being more out of principle. Besides, he couldn't give away too much away this early on or give his potential business partners such a fright. Once they got down on the other side of the barbed fence, the man walked up to them, who Naruto assumed was Joel. "Took your sweet time, Tess." Joel spoke directly to her, slight annoyance in his voice. "Where's the stuff? And who the hell is this kid?" he said, as he carefully scrutinized both Tess and the child, unable to find any stash of weapons or bags of ammunition they had been promised. Tess walked up to Joel, indicating a more private talk, which Naruto was inclined to give them. "Did Bill turn his back on us?" he whispered to Tess. "Oh, it's all here," Tess whispered back. Joel took a more careful look at Tess than at Naruto before turning back to Tess. "I don't see it. The kid will show you after. It will literally blow your mind. We also have a business deal with this kid. We get him into the city, get him legit credentials, and he works for us." "What do you mean work for us? He's just a kid, Tess. What use is he to us?" "Trust me, he has his uses. On top of that, we get medical equipment, the stuff that Boston needs. We'd get a lot selling that off on the black market." Joel looked back at Naruto again quickly, who was waiting patiently for them to finish. "He doesn't look like he has anything on him though," Joel questioned. "Oh, he does," Tess spoke before looking back at Naruto, and walking back to him, followed closely by Joel. "Kid, show him." Naruto, obligated to do so, unrolled his scroll and channeled chakra into the storage seal. And *poof, various weapons and bags of ammo appeared all over the ground. Reacting out of confusion, suspicion, or fear, Joel pulled out a gun and aimed it at Naruto. "What the hell? Easy there, big boy," Tess spoke, trying to calm Joel down. "Tess, what the hell did he do? He has a unique ability, don't you think? We can use that, and he probably has others as well. We'll get into more detail when we get back inside Boston and into the safe house. It's getting late, and it's more difficult to work at night." Joel put his gun away. "Fine. Okay, let's get moving on," Tess spoke before walking towards the direction of Boston past the forest. Joel watched as Tess walked on. He took a look back at Naruto. "What's your name, kid?" "Naruto." "Okay, Naruto, I'm Joel. Keep up." Flashback end. Naruto continued to travel across the rooftops, taking careful note of the military guards posted about the streets and along the roofs. It was nighttime, and curfew was in effect. As such, he had to be extra careful how he traveled, and couldn't openly risk himself by being seen. Naruto had just gotten back from trading some pills to attain a couple of ration cards, and though the trade was done very late in the afternoon with the usual black market dealings due to the military changing shifts, it presented the problem of constant danger when he had to make his way back. He wasn't all that worried though. He knew he could handle himself, and Joel had finally realized he was capable enough, as he undergoes such cases time and time again. It was fortunate it was a simple small-scale trade with a trustworthy client, or Joel and Tess would have tagged along, making the journey back all the more difficult. Naruto had just made his way into a tall apartment building via the rooftop, entering through the rooftop door, when suddenly he heard a scream of fear and desperation. Although screams were frequent, he could tell this was no ordinary scream, as it sounded like a child. Having traveled the world and seeing its dangers, he could distinguish the difference between screams, pinpointing it to different ages. It was obviously a girl, a very young girl, and identifying such danger, he rushed down the stairway and down the corridor towards the apartment, with the sounds of struggle increasing with each step. He took distinct notice of the apartments he bypassed having quarantine locks on them, standard military issue that stretched across the height of the door. He approached the door with sounds of struggles on the other side, and without wasting any time, Naruto smashed down the door, finding the reason behind the commotion. A man, an African-American man recently infected, was attacking a young African-American girl who was on the ground holding the infected man by the throat. Naruto pulled out a knife, but before he was about to take out the infected, the girl with her free arm grabbed a knife and stabbed it through the man's head in desperation. Suddenly from the other room, another infected came running into the main apartment dining room. An African-American woman this time, who also appeared recently infected, and was charging directly at the downed girl, likely recovering from the trauma of her first kill. Naruto quickly threw the knife in his hand at the charging infected through the head, feeling her before she got too close. Within moments it was over, 2 dead infected on the floor, with a sobbing girl around his age huddled into a ball close to them. Before Naruto approached her, he took the opportunity to look around, making sure there weren't any more surprises. As he looked, he noticed a photo on the kitchen desk, a picture of all 3 people in the room, a family. He now understood completely what she was going through, and how she must be feeling. Such tragedies were commonplace these days. He looked around more, noticing distinct signs of struggle. Broken plates were all over the floor, books scattered, and chairs and tables upturned. It was a sad sight seeing the sobbing girl in the middle of it all. Naruto carefully approached the child. "You okay?" He spoke softly, so as to not frighten her further. "Sob, sob." The girl continued to cry over her loss. He understood. It was a completely natural reaction, likely being her first kill, an encounter with an infected, and to top it off being her parents. Hell, he'd be more worried if she wasn't crying over her loss. Naruto spoke again, hoping to get more out of the girl. "I know what you're going through, how you feel, but I need you to concentrate. I need you to look at me." The girl continued to cry. "I need to get you somewhere safe." "What's your name?" Sob, sob. The girl didn't look up at him, remaining curled into a ball crying. Then suddenly she gulped and spoke softly. Riley Abel." 2 months later, Naruto waited patiently by the unlit campfire by his friend Winston's camp in the old abandoned mall. His camp was basic and simple, just an old yellow feather tent on the ground level of the mall filled with basic necessities including clothes, a bed, and a lot of alcohol. Naruto had come across him during his time exploring the vast mall, simply out of curiosity rather than his normal scavenging. He came across him when he noticed his tent at ground level with a horse along with a lit campfire and food cooking in a pot. Being the curious individual he was, he decided to take a look and came across Winston Asher. He was a simple guy with a short brown beard, black eyes, and mainly wore long-sleeved clothing, particularly trench coats, and a winter cap. He supposed the thickness helps if he comes across infected that weren't put down in the mall, providing at least some semblance of protection. Early into their talk he even introduced the princess, the horse who has been his companion early into the fungal outbreak. Naruto easily became friends with him, and every time they would talk about adventures and what they were up to. He would talk about his adventures outside the quarantine zone while keeping the more private parts a secret. After all, Winston was still military, while he in return would talk of his time growing up in the infection-free world, and what he'd been up to as a soldier. Of course, Winston would ask for some basic stipulations for his presents such as whiskey, and sometimes food, but it was worth the price. He sort of reminded him of the older elite shinobi, eyes old, and tired having seen so much, something he was becoming accustomed to, as of late. Winston talked about himself having skipped school like he supposedly did, coming to the very mall he based himself, playing games with friends, pranking, the usual stuff children did back in their time. He was always nostalgic about those times. Then again, who wouldn't be of a better time? He even showed him around the mall, describing the better times as he rode on his horse. It was sad he couldn't trust him completely with his secrets, and with him being part of the military and all, but it was still nice to have someone to talk to. His business partners Tess and Joel were more on the serious end, making some of their conversations boring. They simply didn't like getting into details about the past. He supposed the past still haunts them greatly. Naruto continued to patiently wait for Riley. It was boring, as Winston was out doing work with his unit, so he had no one to talk to as he waited for Riley. When he had saved Riley, Naruto quickly took her to Winston, who would know more on what to do. Tess and Joel were on the other side of town, and with it being dark and curfew in effect, Winston was his safest bet. Riley had passed out from crying and all the shock after a while, so it did make things easier for him to bring her to the mall. All he really did was grab her and run across the rooftops, taking careful time and walking across planks and monitoring his leaps as he watched his chakra levels. He may not have the abundance he once had, but it was still better than nothing. Naruto brought her to Winston and explained to him what was going on and what had happened. He was peeved that Naruto had dropped the task on him, and all he really could do was offer more whiskey and food in the future, something he readily agreed to. The plan was simple. Winston would bring her to the unit commander, explain the situation, and get her into the military-sponsored orphanage and academy. Already a quarantine unit had been deployed to her apartment to clean up the mess, something Naruto couldn't afford to get involved unless they find out he isn't properly registered in the academy. Flashback. Naruto spent the night at Winston's camp, making sure everything went smoothly, and when morning Riley woke up in a fright. "Where am I? What happened?" Riley spoke up, confused, frightened, and in a daze. Naruto, having noticed her awaken, walked up to her from his position of stirring the pot, and knelt down, and began explaining the situation to her. "What do you remember from last night?" He spoke calmly, trying to ease her into the information. She began speaking, stuttering in her words before starting to cry. Naruto, understanding what she was going through, gave her some room, as he got up and continued working on breakfast. He supposed the best thing to do now was make sure she had something in her belly before he continued. It wasn't anything elaborate he cooked up, just some instant soup he had found a while back. In 10 minutes Naruto had finished the soup, at which time Winston woke up coming out of the feather tent, likely attracted to the smell of his cooking. Naruto prepared Winston's meal, as gratitude for his help, as well as his own breakfast. Winston, taking notice of the girl, only glanced at her before he went to pick up his bowl of soup from Naruto and give a quick morning to him. Everyone sat in silence around the small fire, the mall becoming illuminated by the early morning sunrays, displaying a unique environment of grass and other vegetation popping up from the abandoned mall. Naruto and Winston ate their soup quietly, while Riley, no longer sobbing, stayed curled up into a ball in deep thought. Naruto understood she was depressed, but in this world you had to move on quickly if you wanted to survive. From what Winston and Tess had told him, more people died clinging onto their pasts and infected families in hope, and all that did was make the problem a whole lot worse. One slip up, and you're gone, simple as that. Then again, if the world was so messed up, was it truly worth living through it all? Naruto spoke up, looking at her dazed state. I understand that you've lost your parents to the infection, even having to take your father out yourself, but you can't continue to beat yourself up over that. Naruto got up, putting his bowl of soup down on the ground, took another bowl out, and filled it with soup. Understanding Riley was hungry, he walked up to her, reaching the bowl out towards her and offering, "Here, eat up. There is a lot we have to do today. You're going to need the energy." Riley looked up at him, her eyes still red from crying. "Why?" She spoke softly. "Why did this happen? Why?" She spoke out louder and slightly angry. Naruto, having experienced the feeling before, understood she was angry at herself, at the world, everything. If everything is this bad, what's the point of trying? She sobbed out lightly as she looked down and away from Naruto, deep in thought. Naruto put the bowl down in front of her. He wasn't sure what he could say. Sure, he was a veteran of suffering. His friends in the elemental nations were gone due to his failure, and the people in the community died, him likely playing a role in the whole fiasco. But he didn't have much to lean on back then. If it weren't for his experience, his abilities, and the advantages they brought, he would have died long ago, just another casualty. The only reason he got out of his funk was that time carried on regardless of his pain. He wasn't universally special. He was just a unique case, and as time continued, he just chose to give life another chance. He wasn't really influenced by it. Naruto only had one thing to say to Riley. He wasn't sure it would work, but it was at least something. "It's because we are survivors." Naruto spoke out slowly, trying to get her to register his words. He knew she wouldn't be up and about so quickly, but it was at least a start. In this world, dying from old age or natural causes is considered a blessing. Not everyone is so lucky. You're alive, and as long as you have the will to stay alive, you should follow that until the very end. He spoke firmly, and out of experience, Winston likely noticed the level of wisdom in his tone and words, something that differentiated Naruto from the rest of the kids he'd seen running around. Naruto walked back to his spot on the floor, picked up the bowl, and continued eating. He had a job to do today, and, as much as he didn't want to, he had to go soon. Besides, if the soldiers found out he wasn't actually enrolled in school, as he traveled around the neighborhood, fake permission or not, he'd be screwed. Naruto looked at Winston, who was going in for seconds, as he finished his bowl of soup. "Winston, I need to get going," he spoke out, as he put the empty bowl away, and got his bag, and scrolled from the side. "Take care of her, will you? I'll give you a bonus if it's done well." Yeah? Sure thing." Winston sounded off, as he continued slurping down the tasty soup. Winston eyed his bag, and scrolled incredulously. "Naruto, you never told me why you continue to carry that big hunk of paper around. What's so important about it?" He sounded off, slightly suspicious. He had always been suspicious of Naruto, but he never chose to act on it. It seemed like a waste of time, and a whole new set of problems with the blonde. Besides, he was nice company, and it seemed stupid to drive him away. "Sorry, Winston, that's a secret." He sounded off, as he began to walk off, up the elevators, and towards the exit point of the mall. That was the last he had seen of Riley from 2 months ago. Flashback, and currently Naruto was at the camp waiting for Riley. Winston had told him during his last visit that Riley was doing well, and was at the military orphanage, and enrolled in the military academy. As a month passed, she eventually made her way back to the camp, sneaking out at the dead of night. Apparently she wanted to talk to him, and had been sneaking out of the academy to visit Winston and him. He wasn't with Winston all night, so it was likely he had just missed her on certain days, but it didn't matter. He'd make sure he was here today. The only real problem was the way Winston spoke to him. His voice easily seeped suspicion. Understandable. After all, why wait and ask for him to speak at the camp when they can do it at the academy? Hell, the fact she hadn't seen him there was all he really needed to be suspicious, especially since he's the same age as her, and an orphan. Still, Naruto was grateful that Winston hadn't bothered the military about his identity. He supposed he could come to trust him with what he did soon enough. Suddenly Naruto's ears peaked. He could hear the footsteps of someone on the second floor coming down the escalators. Being cautious, he quickly hid behind a support column in the dark, and looked on at the approaching figure. It was Riley. Noticing it was Riley, Naruto walked out from behind his column, and out of the dark to approach her. "Hey Naruto" sounded off, catching her attention. "Hey" was her response. There was a slight pause in the atmosphere, as if both were unsure as to how to proceed, until Naruto spoke up. "I heard from Winston that you wanted to see me." "Yeah, I just want to talk." She spoke slightly down and unsure. "Sure, I got time to kill," he replied, as he took his small bag and scrolled off his back and sat down near the unlit campfire. He scavenged through his quick supplies looking for a pair of matches and some paper to burn, relighting the fire to help keep them warm. Riley followed his lead and also sat down close to him, far enough that they couldn't reach each other, but near enough to talk. A tense minute passed, Riley looking a bit conflicted over what to say while Naruto waited patiently for her to speak. "Why?" Riley suddenly spoke softly, as she looked down, avoiding contact with his eyes. She looked up again, more firm in her speech. "Why did you save me?" Naruto, confused about the question, simply replied, "Why not? You needed help, and I helped." It wasn't much of an answer, but to Naruto it was kind of a redundant question. She looked at Naruto intently. "Winston told me about you. You don't have parents, yet you make do with what you've got. You lived on the outside, survived, and made your way here. He says you're supposedly enrolled in the academy, yet there was no mention of you anywhere. Why were you even there in the unit? Why are you even here? Why?" Naruto looked calm outside, but on the inside he was cursing. Well, there wasn't really much to lose. The only real problem giving him away was Winston, and he was pretty sure Riley wouldn't rat him out to the military lest she too gets in trouble for traveling out at night during curfew hours. Hell, even Winston himself would probably get in trouble for harboring a potential fugitive. Naruto calmly thought over his words as he flicked a stick on the campfire. "It's because I rely on myself. I see things in a different way than you or Winston does. I'm not a rebel, a soldier, or someone desperate to get by." Naruto spoke, putting his hands behind his back, leaning slightly. "I'm a survivor. You may think that what you're going through is tough, and the world hates you, but it is a whole lot worse outside than in here." He spoke calmly, trying to get his message across. She focused on him more intently. "You didn't answer my question." Naruto sighed. He supposed he didn't. He supposed he could tell her more information. Besides, Winston probably already knew he wasn't enrolled in the academy. Probably already found out he's a secret scavenger/smuggler. He was always a sharp person through the eyes. He just never spoke in depth about it. He was fortunate he was slightly lazy in that regard. "I've lived on the outside of Riley. I've seen the worst and the best humanity can bring. You're right in suspecting that I'm not enrolled in the academy. Never have been, and hopefully never will be." "Why not?" She spoke out, more confused than firm. "Because I find it better to rely on myself than anyone else. Besides, all the academy really teaches you is how to fight rebels and fireflies. The military itself aren't the good guys in all of this. Rather, they're the same as everyone else." "What do you mean?" She spoke confusedly. She had been taught over the months that the military is the only power that can keep order and bring the world back to what it used to be. Fireflies, for instance, had been stirring up a rebellion, getting more people killed. "I'm a smuggler, Riley. I live by my own rules. I don't think the military would take too kindly to me. Why do you continue to live the hard life then? You're a kid like me. If you join up, I'm sure they'd accept you. Hell, they may even covet your experience. You'd get far. Never been one to support the system, you know. I also have other problems associated with joining up. Sure, good food and a safe lounge would be nice for a while, but in the end you're not free to think. You simply won't get things done. You need to make your own decisions, not let anyone else make it for you. It's such thinking like this that fireflies rose into power in the first place." Naruto continued, as he leaned back, further back, looking up into the starry sky through the broken ceiling, the mall being slightly illuminated by the fire, and the lights seeping down from the stars. "You only live once. How you live should be determined by you, and you alone. I always thought that by doing what I do I can leave a positive mark on the world in some way. It's a hard life, and eventually my luck is going to run out. But I wouldn't have it any other way, and it sure beats me reaching my end through some random patrol in the military." Naruto sighed again, and continued, "I may sound delusional, but it's such hopes that people cling to nowadays. Hope that a better world would come from all of this suffering. Hope that people can return to their long and peaceful lives they once had, and a life where children aren't a problem maintaining, rather the focus of the future instead." Riley thought over what he said. She wasn't sure in what to think. She had been taught by the military time and time again that they were the only solution to the problem. Yet this kid in front of her showed her a different path, walked another path, somewhere he believes would eventually take him to a better world. Whether he truly believed it or not, Riley just sat silent for a long time, looking up at the ceiling and out to the starry night sky, deep in thought. Maybe, just maybe, there was another path she could follow in life. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.